She run off north and forgot where she came from. What my sister didn't know until the will reading. The paper hit the kitchen table with a slap, and Darlene's finger came down on it like she was pinning a moth. "Right there," she said, loud enough for the whole porch to hear through the screen. "Mama left the house to me. Says it plain. And you," she turned to the cousins crowded in Mama's doorway, Reba fanning herself, old Uncle Cleve with his hat in his hands, "you all remember it too. Suzanne run off north and forgot where she came from. Didn't call, didn't come. So don't stand in my kitchen now with your hand out." The kitchen smelled the way it always had, of scorched cornbread and the lemon oil Mama rubbed into the cabinets every Saturday of her life. Somewhere in the front room, a box fan rattled against its cage. The ceiling light buzzed, one bulb dying, throwing a yellow flicker across Darlene's face, while she smiled at me the way you smile at a dog you've already kicked. I looked at the will under her finger. I looked at her signature witnessing it, and I did not say one word. Because Darlene did not know what I did for a living, she thought I answered phones up in Atlanta. She had no idea what was already sitting, notarized and sealed, in a fireproof drawer 40 miles away. Let me take you back, though, because a slap only makes sense if you know the hand. I grew up in that house on Anthony Road in Macon, Georgia, the two of us, Darlene and Suzanne Duplessis, 18 months apart and close as two coats on one hook. Our father left when I was 6 and Darlene was 8, and after that it was Mama, Ola Mae Duplessis, and the two of us and Grandmama Isadora, who lived with us until I was 14. Mama cleaned rooms at the old Dempsey Hotel downtown for 31 years. She made $4.10 an hour when I started paying attention to such things, and she could stretch a dollar until it screamed. We were not poor in the way that shames you. We were poor in the way that teaches you. I knew the price of everything. I knew that a bag of Dixie Lily grits was cheaper than the name brand and tasted the same. I knew Mama kept exactly $340 in a Sucrets tin behind the flour for the light bill and the water bill, and nothing else ever. I knew that when Grandmama Isadora sat on the porch in the evening, she would take out her folding hand fan, black lacquer sticks, a painted scene of a river and a red bridge, silk gone soft as a moth's wing, and she would open it with one snap of her wrist, crack, like a card dealer, and she would say, "A lady keeps her own weather." That fan was the one beautiful thing in our house. Grandmama had carried it since 1938. When she died, she left it to me, not to Darlene, to me. And Mama pressed it into my hands at the funeral and said, "She wanted you to have it. You favor her." Darlene watched that happen. I want you to remember that Darlene watched that happen, because it is a thread that runs the whole length of this. Here is the part Darlene never bothered to learn. I did not run off north. I went to Atlanta, 90 miles up I-75 when I was 19, and I got a job filing papers in the records room of a title company off Peachtree. Filing papers. That is where it started. I found out I had a head for it, for deeds, for chains of title, for the little liens and easements that most people never read. A woman named Frances Okafor ran that office, and she saw something in me, and she paid for my night classes at Georgia State, $118 a credit hour, while I filed by day. By the time I was 34, I was a licensed title examiner and closing agent, and by 41, I owned a piece of that company. By the time Mama got sick, I had spent 22 years doing exactly one thing: reading who really owns what and proving it, and unwinding the tangles that liars leave behind. I closed my first $1 million file in 2009. I have been an expert witness in 3 property fraud cases in Fulton County. I have testified about forged signatures in front of a judge more times than Darlene has changed her hair color, and Lord knows that is often. I never bragged about it, not to Darlene, not to the cousins. When people back home asked, I said I worked in an office up in Atlanta, and let them picture whatever they wanted. Mama knew. Mama knew exactly what I did. and Mama was proud. And Mama, this matters, Mama asked me things, quiet things, on the phone that I did not think much about at the time. And I did not forget where I came from. I came home the second Sunday of every single month. I have the receipts, literally. I kept a folder of the gas station slips off I-75, the Flash Foods in Forsyth where I always stopped for a peach and a bottled water. 12 tanks of gas a year for 11 years. I drove down for Mama's birthday and Easter and the church homecoming in October where they laid out fried chicken on folding tables in the fellowship hall. I sat with Mama. I fixed her gutters in 2016 with my own 2 hands. I paid for her new roof in 2019, $8,600, Halcomb Roofing. I have the canceled check. Darlene lived 4 minutes from Mama and saw her maybe once a fortnight, and only when she needed something. The early years between us, though, were good. I want to be fair, because I loved my sister for 40 years before she made me stop. When we were girls, she taught me to ride a bike in the Kmart parking lot on Eisenhower and caught me every time I tipped. When my daughter Nadine was born in 1998, Darlene drove up to Atlanta and stayed a week and washed every dish in my house so I could sleep. She could make a room laugh. She had a way of leaning her head on your shoulder that made you forgive her anything. For a long time, I did forgive her anything. But there is a kind of person who, when they see you rise even a little, decides you must have taken it from them. Darlene was that kind. And it came out slow, the way rot comes up through a floorboard. You smell it a long time before you see it give. The first wrong note I remember was Thanksgiving 2011. We were in Mama's kitchen, this same kitchen, the same buzzing light, and I mentioned, just making talk, that Nadine had gotten into the University of Georgia. Darlene set down her plate. "Must be nice," she said, "to have money to throw at that." Then she smiled so it could pass for a joke. Nadine had gotten a Hope Scholarship. There was no money thrown. But I saw the thing behind Darlene's eyes flatten, and I filed it away, the way I file a lien nobody else notices. Second note, 2014. Mama's church had a fundraiser, and I sent a check for $500 in Mama's name. Somehow, by the time it got told around the fellowship hall, it was Darlene who had given it. She didn't correct anybody. When I heard her accept a hug from Sister Vanell for her generous heart, I understood something cold. My sister was comfortable wearing my clothes in public. I filed it. Third note, and this one cut. 2018. Grandmama's fan had a stick that came loose, and I took it to a man in Atlanta who restored antiques, Mr. Petrov on Cheshire Bridge, and he set it right for $85 and cleaned the silk. When I brought it home to show Mama, Darlene picked it up off the table, opened it wrong, yanked it, not the wrist snap, and I heard the top rivet strain. "It's just an old fan," she said when I reached for it. "You act like it's the crown jewels." She fanned herself twice, bored, and dropped it. But she watched my face the whole time. She had learned that I loved it, and she had learned that touching it touched me, and she stored that away the same as I stored everything. We were sisters. We used the same knife. We just cut different things. The notes came faster after Mama's first stroke in the spring of 2021. Mama was 74. She came through it, but her right side dragged and her speech thickened, and she needed somebody near. I offered to move her up to Atlanta. Mama refused. That house on Anthony Road was the only thing my father never managed to take, and she meant to die in it. So Darlene, who lived 4 minutes away, became the one on the ground. And I paid for it. I want to be plain about the money, because the money is where Darlene told herself her story. I set up an account and put $1,500 a month into it for Mama's care. Groceries, the co-pays, the woman named Alicia who came 3 days a week to help Mama bathe. Over 2.5 years, that is $45,000, and I have every statement. Darlene had the debit card because she was there. I trusted her with it because she was my sister and she was there and I could not be. That was my mistake, and I have made peace with it Because a person should be able to trust their sister. If you cannot, the fault is not in the trusting. By late 2022, the account was hemorrhaging in ways that had nothing to do with Mama. A $900 charge at a furniture store, a cruise deposit, $1,200, to somewhere Mama could not have gone if you carried her. When I asked, gentle, Darlene had an answer for everything, and every answer had a little knife in it. You want to sit down here and wipe her? No? Then don't count my quarters from up in Atlanta. She had built herself a fortress out of the fact that she was present and I was not, and she dared me to storm it. Then, in the quiet, the thing I did not know was happening. Mama, it turned out, had been thinking about all of it longer and clearer than any of us. Back in the fall of 2022, on one of my second Sundays, Mama had asked me to sit down at the kitchen table, and she'd said, slow, fighting her own mouth for the words, Suzanne, I want to fix the house so it goes right. I want it done proper, by a real lawyer, not that form Darlene keeps waving. I did not push. I said, whatever you want, Mama, we'll do it right. And I gave her the name of the one estate attorney in Macon I trusted, a man I'd worked a title dispute against years back and respected down to my shoes. Marcus Sinclair of Sinclair and Bell on Mulberry Street. I did not go with her. I want that on the record. She went herself, twice, with our cousin Perry driving her, and she did her business behind a closed door, and I only knew the shape of it, not the whole. I'll come back to that. Because in April of 2024, Mama had her second stroke, in her sleep, in her own bed, in the house on Anthony Road, exactly as she wanted. She was 77, and she was barely 3 days in the ground before Darlene made her move. The call came on a Tuesday. Darlene's voice was syrup. Now, Suzanne, I don't want no fuss, but Mama left me the house. We found her will. It's all legal. I know you're grieving, so you take your time coming to get your little keepsakes, but the house is settled. And she hung up before I could get a full breath in. I drove down that weekend. And that is where this story started. In the kitchen, the box fan rattling, the one bulb flickering yellow, Darlene's finger pinning that piece of paper to the table while the cousins watched from the doorway. Let me tell you about that paper, because I read it the way I have read 10,000 documents. It was a single page off a website form, the kind you can fill in for $29.99. It was dated January 8th, 2024, 3 months before Mama died. It left the residence and all its contents to my daughter, Darlene Duplessis Roan. It was signed Ola Mae Duplessis in a shaky hand and witnessed by two names, Darlene's own and a neighbor named Tuck Ridley, who, I happen to know, had died in November of 2023. A dead man had witnessed my mother's will. And the signature. I have spent 22 years looking at forged signatures. Mama's real hand, after the first stroke, dragged low and to the right. The O in Ola always opened at the top like a broken egg. This signature was neat. Too neat. It was Darlene's careful copy of a healthy woman's hand, made by somebody who never watched her mother sign her name at a hospital admitting desk with a nurse steadying her wrist. I had watched that. Darlene had not. I stood in that kitchen and I felt the old grief and the new fury braid together into something very quiet. Darlene was telling the cousins her story. I'd run off north. I'd forgotten. I'd shown up with my hand out. Reba was nodding. Uncle Cleve looked at his hat. The system in that room, the family, the county, the sheer weight of who was present, had already sided with my sister. She had the paper. She had the doorway full of witnesses. She had the story. I did not cry, and I did not argue. I looked at the dead man's name on the witness line, and I heard something in my chest go click, like a deadbolt sliding home. All right, Darlene, I said. If that's Mama's will, then let's do it proper. Let's have a real reading, with the lawyer, in this house. Everybody here. You'll want the cousins to see it's all legal." I smiled at her. "I'll set it up." She should have heard the door close in my voice. She was too busy winning to listen. I drove back to Atlanta that night. I did not call a friend to cry. I called Marcus Sinclair at 8:40 the next morning, Wednesday, and I said 7 words. "It's Olame's daughter. She's gone, and there's a problem." There was a silence on the line, and then Sinclair said, "Careful. Ms. Duplessis, I've been expecting a call. Your mother left instructions with me about exactly this. Can you come to Mulberry Street Friday at 10? Here is the part I could not have known standing in that kitchen, the part Mama built while nobody was watching. And I'm going to tell it to you plain, the way I wish somebody had told it to Darlene before she signed a dead man's name. My mother, in the fall of 2022, had gone to Marcus Sinclair and made a real will, a proper one, drafted by a licensed estate attorney, signed October 19, 2022, at a time when 3 witnesses and a notary all put their hands to a page swearing Olame Duplessis was of sound mind. In that will, she did 2 things. 1, she named me, Suzanne Duplessis, as the executor of her estate, the person with the legal authority to settle everything, appointed by the court, the one whose word the county would take over anybody standing in a doorway. 2, she left the house at Anthony Road, all 1,340 square feet of it, and the third of an acre it sits on, to me. Not out of spite toward Darlene. Sinclair showed me the letter Mama dictated to go with it. Mama knew. She knew about the furniture charge and the cruise deposit and the account bleeding out. She wrote, in words Sinclair took down, "Darlene will fight this. She has a habit of taking what she can hold. I want the house in the hands that will keep it in the family and not sign it away by spring." Suzanne kept faith. Suzanne came home every month and thought I didn't count. I counted. I sat in Sinclair's office on Mulberry Street on that Friday, and I read my mother's real words. And for the first time since the funeral, I put my face in my hands and wept. Not for the house, for the counting, for every second Sunday I thought went unseen. And then I stopped, and I wiped my face with the back of my hand, and Marcus Sinclair, a broad, slow-spoken man of about 60 with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair, slid a box of tissues across the desk and said, "Now, tell me about the paper your sister's waving." I told him. The $29.99 form. The date, January 8th, 2024. The dead witness, Tuck Ridley, gone since November. The 2 neat signature. Sinclair took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly on his tie, which is a thing he does when he has already won and is deciding how gently to say so. "Ms. Duplessis," he said, "you understand better than most clients I get what we're holding. Let me lay it out anyway, for the record." And he laid it out. Mama's real will was dated October 19th, 2022. Darlene's forgery was dated January 8th, 2024. Under Georgia law, a later valid will revokes an earlier one. That's the rule Darlene was probably counting on, if she thought about law at all, because her paper had the later date. But a forgery is not a will. A document witnessed by a dead man and signed in a hand that isn't the decedent's is not a later will. It is evidence of a crime. Once we proved the January paper false, the October will, the real one, stood as the last valid word my mother ever spoke about her house. The forgery, far from beating my mother's will, would void itself and hand me everything, and put my sister in the path of a fraud charge besides. Then I stopped being only a grieving daughter, and I became what I have been for 22 years, and I helped him build it. I want you to understand that I did not do a single loud thing. There was no confrontation, no phone thrown, no ugly words traded in a Piggly Wiggly parking lot for the cousins to chew on. I did the quiet work. That is the only kind that holds up. First, the signature. I pulled documents with Mama's genuine post-stroke signature. The hospital admission form from April 2021, a bank card she'd signed at Robbins Financial in the summer of 2021, a birthday card she'd sent Nadine. I had them, and Sinclair had the notarized October will besides. We sent all of it, along with a clean copy of Darlene's January forgery, to a forensic document examiner named Priscilla Vance out of Atlanta, whom I had seen take apart a forgery on a witness stand once and never forgotten. Her fee was $3,200 and worth every dollar. 3 weeks later, she sent back a 9-page report. Her conclusion, in the flat language of her trade, the January 8th signature was not authored by the same hand as Mama's genuine signatures and showed characteristics consistent with a simulated forgery. Slow drawn strokes, pen lifts where a real signature flows, a copyist's careful evenness. Second, the dead witness. This was the piece that needed no expert at all, which is what made it beautiful. I ordered a certified copy of Tuck Ridley's death certificate from the Bibb County Vital Records Office. $25, one afternoon, one clerk who never knew what she'd handed me. Tuck Ridley died November 14th, 2023. Darlene's forgery had him witnessing a signing on January 8th, 2024. 55 days after the man was in the ground, my sister had put his name on a page and sworn he'd watched Mama sign. You cannot examine your way out of that. A dead man cannot witness anything. Third, the money, because I wanted the whole picture in one frame. I pulled 2.5 years of statements on the care account, the $45,000 I'd put in, and the withdrawals. Sinclair advised me we didn't strictly need it to win the house, and he was right. But I wanted it in the folder, because a person who forges a will has usually been rehearsing with smaller thefts, and I wanted every rehearsal on the record if it ever came to that. And fourth, the thing I'm proudest of, because it wasn't strategy, it was blood, I called Perry. Perry is our first cousin, our Aunt Dovey's boy, a big, gentle man of 51 who drives a delivery route for a bakery supply company and has never told a lie in his life because he cannot hold the shape of one in his head. Perry was the one who had driven Mama to Sinclair's office twice in the fall of 2022. Perry had sat in the waiting room both times. Perry had helped Mama up the steps and heard her say, in the car, "I'm getting it fixed so it goes to Suzanne, and I don't want your Aunt Darlene to know till it's done." Perry had carried that by himself for 2 years, ever since, out of love for Mama and dread of Darlene, and it had sat on him like a stone. When I called Perry and told him what Darlene had done, that dead man's paper, that story about me forgetting where I came from, there was a long quiet on the phone. Then Perry said, in his slow way, "Suzanne, I got something to tell you, and I've been sick carrying it." And he told me about the drives. And I said, "Perry, would you say that in front of the family at the reading?" And he said, "I promised Aunt Ola May I'd keep it quiet till it was done. I reckon it's done now." Perry was my conscience witness, not a tool, my mother's word, walking on 2 legs. I set the reading for the 3rd Saturday in June, 11 o'clock in the morning, at the house on Anthony Road. Darlene's house, as far as Darlene knew. I told her Sinclair would come and read Mama's will proper in front of everybody, so it's all legal and nobody can say different. I made it sound like I'd given up. I let her win right up to the doorstep. She invited the cousins herself. She wanted an audience for her victory. I let her build my courtroom for me. The morning of, I drove down early with the folder on the passenger seat and Grandmama's fan in my purse. My old Camry didn't catch on the first turn of the key. It never does when it's above 90 degrees. And I sat in Sinclair's parking lot on Mulberry and turned it twice more until it took. And I remember thinking, the whole world stutters before it starts. Then I followed Sinclair's silver Buick out to Anthony Road. The house was full. Reba was there, and Uncle Cleve, and 2 of the Ridley girls, and Sister Vanell from the church, and Perry standing quiet by the door in a pressed shirt. Darlene had put out a spread, a store cake from Kroger, sweet tea in Mama's good glasses. She was holding court in the front room, wearing black like the chief mourner, and when I came in, she gave me a look of pure syrup pity. "There she is," she said to the room. "Suzanne, come all the way down from Atlanta. Well, sit down, honey, and let's get this over so you can get back to your life up there." The ceiling light in the kitchen still flickered, that one dying bulb. Nobody had changed it. The box fan turned in the corner. It smelled of lemon oil and Kroger frosting. Marcus Sinclair set his briefcase on Mama's dining table, the one with the burn mark from Grandmama's iron, and he clicked it open, and the room got quiet, the way a room does when a man in a good suit opens a briefcase. Darlene sat forward, smug, her January paper already in her lap. She thought she knew how this went. She thought Sinclair had come to rubber stamp her. "Thank you all for coming," Sinclair said in that slow Mulberry Street voice. "I represent the estate of Ola May Duplessis. Before I read, I'll note for everyone that I am the attorney who drafted Mrs. Duplessis' last will and testament in my office on October 19th, 2022, with 3 witnesses and a notary present." I watched Darlene's face. I watched the word October land on her. Her paper said January. I saw her do the math, saw the first hairline crack run up through the syrup. "That can't be right," Darlene said, and gave a little laugh. "Mama's will is January. I've got it right here. It's the newest one. The newest one counts." She half rose, waving the $29.99 form. "Everybody knows the newest one counts." "You're correct that a later valid will controls," Sinclair said, mild as milk, "which is why we need to look at both. May I?" And he held out his hand for her paper, and Darlene, trapped by her own audience, by all those watching cousins she'd invited, had to give it to him. She could not refuse in front of Sister Vanell. Her fortress of being watched became the wall at her back. Sinclair laid her January paper on the table next to Mama's October will and Priscilla Vance's 9-page report and one more single sheet, face down. He put on his glasses. "I'll be brief and I'll be plain, so everyone in this room understands," he said. "There are 2 documents claiming to be Mrs. Duplessis' will. This one," he touched the October will, "was signed in my office, witnessed and notarized when Mrs. Duplessis was of sound mind. It names her daughter Suzanne Duplessis as executor of the estate, and it leaves this house to Suzanne Duplessis." The room made a sound, a single, low sound, like a pew when everybody shifts at once. Darlene's mouth opened. "That's a lie. She never—" "Suzanne, you did this. You went up there behind my back." "I did not drive your mother to my office, Ms. Roan," Sinclair said. "Your cousin did. And this second document," he turned her January paper face up so the cousins could see it, "is dated January 8th, 2024. It's witnessed by 2 people. One signature is yours, Ms. Roan. The other," he slid the certified death certificate out from under the face-down sheet and set it on top, and even from across the room you could read the seal, "belongs to Mr. Tuck Ridley, who died on November 14th, 2023. 55 days before this will says he watched your mother sign it." The box fan turned. The bulb flickered. Nobody breathed. I have seen a lot of faces lose their color in a lot of rooms. I have never seen anything like what happened to Darlene's face in Mama's front room. It went from syrup to gray, the blood draining down out of it the way water leaves a sink, and her hand, with the paper still in it, started to shake so the paper made a small ticking sound against the air. She looked at the death certificate. She looked at the October will with my name on it. She looked at the cousins, at Sister Vanell, at Reba, and found no fortress there anymore. Only faces turning slowly toward her the way faces turn toward a smell. I must have got the date wrong on Tuck," she said, and her voice had gone up high and thin. "It's a mistake on the form. It doesn't mean—" "There's also this," Sinclair said, and set Priscilla Vance's report on the pile. A forensic examiner's finding that the signature on your January document was not made by your mother's hand. Simulated. A forgery. He took his glasses off, slow, and cleaned them on his tie. Ms. Roan, I'd advise you to stop talking now. Anything further you say about that January paper, you may want to say with your own attorney present. And then Perry stood up. He didn't say it loud. Perry never says anything loud. He turned his bakery root cap around in his big hands and he said, to the room, not to Darlene, I drove Aunt Ola May to Mr. Sinclair's office. Twice. Fall of 22. I sat in the waiting room. In the car after, she told me, I'm fixing it so the house goes to Suzanne and don't tell Darlene till it's done. I promised her I'd keep quiet. His voice cracked, this 51-year-old man. I reckon it's done now, Aunt Ola May. I'm sorry I waited. Sister Vanell put her hand over her mouth. Reba looked at Darlene like she'd never seen her. Uncle Cleve turned his hat over once and set it on his knee and looked at the floor. The story Darlene had told for 2 years, that I'd run off north and forgot where I came from, that I'd shown up with my hand out, died right there in the front room, and everybody in it watched it die. Darlene sat down, not gracefully. Her legs just went, and she sat down hard in Mama's chair, and she put the January paper on her knees and looked at it like it had turned into a snake in her lap. You'll take the house, she said to me. And it wasn't a fight anymore. It was barely a whisper. You'll take it and put me out. I know how you are now. I know what you do up there. You'll put me out on the road. I stood up. I reached into my purse and I took out Grandmama Isidora's fan, the black lacquer sticks, the red bridge, the silk soft as a moth's wing, and I opened it with one snap of my wrist. Crack! The whole room heard it. Darlene flinched at the sound like I'd struck her. Because she knew that fan. She'd yanked it wrong. She'd called it just an old fan. And she knew whose hand it had come down through and whose hand it had passed by. I fanned myself once, slow, in Mama's flickering kitchen light, and I let the quiet sit until it was mine. No, Darlene, I said. I'm not going to put you out on the road. I could have. That's the thing I need you to understand. I held every card in that room. The house was mine, in law and in blood. The forged will was a felony, and the forensic report and the dead man's certificate were sitting on Mama's table for the whole family to see. I could have handed the whole folder to the district attorney, the way you'd hand over a bag of groceries. I could have watched them lead my sister out of Mama's house in bracelets and let the cousins remember her that way forever. Every bit of the power in that room had come home to the woman she said ran off and forgot. But I looked at Darlene, sitting in Mama's chair with the snake in her lap, and I did not see a monster. I saw the girl who caught me in the Kmart parking lot every time the bike tipped. I saw the woman who washed my dishes for a week so a new mother could sleep. I saw somebody who had told herself a poison story so many times she'd drowned in it. And I heard Mama in my ear. I want it kept in the family. And I understood that keeping it in the family meant more than the house. Then Darlene broke. Not the panicked, cornered breaking from a minute before. That was fear. This was the other thing. She put both hands over her face and she said through them, wet and ruined, I knew it wasn't mine. I knew, Suzanne. I told myself you didn't need it. You had your money up there. You had your life. I told myself you'd forgot us, so it was all right to. But I knew. Mama trusted you, and I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand that she counted you and not me. She dropped her hands and looked at me with her whole ravaged face. I spent her money, and I lied on a dead man, and I told everybody you ran off, and I knew every minute it was a lie. I'm sorry. Lord, I'm not saying it 'cause you caught me. I'm saying it 'cause it's true, and I'm tired of it being true. That was real. 20 years of reading liars, I know the counterfeit remorse, the kind that's only sorry it lost. This wasn't that. This was a person setting down a stone she'd carried so long her spine had bent around it. So I made my terms, in daylight, in front of the family, so there could never be a fog around them again. Here's how it's going to be, I said, and I said it steady, fanning, slow. The house is mine. That's not a conversation. That's just true. And Mama made it true, not me. Your January paper never existed. We're going to act like the foolishness it was, and it goes in Mr. Sinclair's file, not to the sheriff. I'm not pressing it. That's my choice, and I can unmake it, so you hold on to that. Darlene nodded, fast, not daring to speak. The $45,000 you spent that wasn't Mama's care, we're not going to itemize it in front of the cousins and shame you. But you're going to sit with me and Mr. Sinclair, and we're going to write down what's honest, and you're going to pay back what you can on a schedule you can actually keep. $10 a week if that's the truth of it, because a debt you name out loud stops eating you. That's not punishment. That's the road back. And the house. I looked around the front room, at the burn mark on the table, at the cabinets Mama rubbed with lemon oil every Saturday of her life. The house stays in the family, like Mama wanted. You've got a place in it, a real one, in daylight, on my terms, not squatting in a lie. You come to Sunday dinner. You come as my sister. But you come honest, or you don't come. That's the deal, Darlene. I'm not giving it to you because you earned it today. You didn't. I'm giving it because I choose to, and because Mama counted us both, even when we forgot to count each other. Darlene cried then, the good kind, the kind that washes instead of drowns, and Perry came and put his big hand on her shoulder, and Sister Vanell started to hum something low, and the box fan turned, and the one bulb flickered, and it was, God help me, my family again, on my mother's floor. That was 2 years ago. It's the summer of 2026 now, and I own the house on Anthony Road in Macon, Georgia, 1,340 square feet, a third of an acre, my name on the deed at the Bibb County Courthouse. Suzanne Duplessis, executor and heir, the woman who ran off north and forgot where she came from. I didn't sell it, I fixed it. New roof extended. The gutters I'd hung myself in 2016 cleaned twice a year. A new light in the kitchen that doesn't flicker anymore, though I'll admit I miss the flicker a little. Nadine comes down with the baby. Perry comes for Sunday dinner and eats like a man who's set down a stone. And Darlene comes, honest, in daylight. She's paid back $6,100 of what she owed, $10 and $20 at a time, and every payment she hands me herself. And every time she does, I see her get an inch taller. We are not what we were before the rot. We're something else, something built instead of assumed. It survives because I permitted it to, and we both know it, and that knowing keeps it clean. Last Sunday, she was helping me clear the dishes, and she stopped by the burn mark table and touched it, and she said, "Grandmama's fan, you still got it." And I said I did. I keep it on the mantel now, in the front room where the reckoning happened. This evening, I took it down and I walked out onto the porch of the house that's mine. The cicadas were up in the pecan tree, and somebody down the road had a radio going, and the pavement was letting go of the day's heat. I sat in Mama's chair. I thought about the counting. Then I opened Grandmama Isidora's fan the way she taught me, the way Darlene never could. One turn of the wrist, and it snapped open across the whole warm evening. Crack! Sharp as a card laid down that wins the hand. A lady keeps her own weather. I was home.